Have you ever looked back at someone who shattered your peace and asked God, why did you allow them into my life? They didn't come with warning signs. They came with warmth, with timing that felt divine, with words that slipped into your wounds like medicine, only to later become weapons. And somewhere in the silence after they left, after the confusion, after the betrayal, you whispered to heaven, was that love? Or was that a lesson wrapped in skin? What if I told you? It was neither. What if that person wasn't meant to complete you, bless you, or even hurt you, but to reveal you? What if their presence was never about them, but about what you could no longer keep hidden? You see, the chosen are not tested in the comfort of praise. They are tested in the discomfort of connection. Not every connection was divine love. Some were divine mirrors. Some were holy fires. Some were sacred disruptions sent by God not to destroy you, but to diagnose you. This isn't a story of heartbreak. This is the sacred dissection of your heart. And if you're still here, if your spirit hasn't looked away, then listen closely, because what comes next is not just a message, it is a mirror. And once you see yourself in it, you'll never unsee it again. You were never abandoned. You were never forgotten. And that person, yes, that person, didn't enter your life by accident. They were a test. So before we move forward, pause, breathe, and type in the comments, I receive. Not because this is just another video, but because this is the moment the test ends and the transformation begins. And now you're ready to remember what heaven saw the whole time. Some people are not storms. They are mirrors, sent not to destroy you, but to awaken you. And while the world calls them toxic, painful, or a mistake, heaven whispers a different truth. They were allowed. Not because God wanted to punish you, but because he wanted to prepare you. It's hard to accept, isn't it? That someone who caused you that much pain could have been part of a holy assignment. That the confusion they left behind was not a detour but a doorway. That the silence, the ghosting, the betrayal, none of it was random. You see, we cry out for blessings, for destiny, for promotion. But rarely do we realize that heaven tests character before it releases favor. And the test doesn't come in a textbook, it comes wrapped in skin. They entered your life at the exact moment your heart began to shift. At the exact moment something deeper was being stirred in your spirit. And God, who sees what we ignore, allowed them in, not to complete you, but to confront you. To touch places you were too proud, too afraid, or too distracted to confront on your own. He could have done it in silence. He could have whispered the lesson in your dreams, but instead he let you feel it, raw, unfiltered, unforgettable. Why? Because what he is preparing you for cannot be built on denial. And sometimes the most honest mirror is pain, not because God is cruel, but because he loves you too much to let you carry old fractures into your future calling. So no, it wasn't random. It wasn't bad luck. That person was sent, a divine setup for an inner unveiling. And if you're brave enough to look again, you'll see it. That person didn't change you. They exposed you. And that exposure, painful as it was, became the first crack in the mask you didn't know you were still wearing. This is the part most people miss. They think the test was about the other person, but it never was. It was always about what their presence brought out of you. And what it reveals next will shatter the illusion completely. They didn't come to comfort your ego. They came to confront your foundation, to press on the parts of you that still flinched in silence, the places you covered up with strength, success, or smiles. They didn't show up to make you feel seen. They showed up so you could finally see yourself. And yet when it happened, you called it chaos. You called it heartbreak. You called it a spiritual attack, but heaven called it surgery. Divine surgical exposure. Because before God raises a chosen one, he reveals what is still buried in them, not to shame them, but to purify them. And he does it not in moments of glory, but through the people who feel like grief. That person wasn't the blessing. They were the blade. The spiritual scalpel that touched the unresolved parts of you. The pride that you dressed up as confidence. The fear you renamed discernment. The control you labeled wisdom. They didn't bring out your worst. They revealed what still needed healing. And that is the mercy of God. He will send what your flesh resists to expose what your spirit is ready to release. But here is the mystery. God didn't stop it. He didn't block the entrance of that person, because he saw what you couldn't. He saw that their presence would do what sermons couldn't: awaken you. They weren't the final chapter. They were the earthquake that cracked open the ground you had built on survival. And when that foundation trembled, heaven smiled. Not because you were in pain, but because the healing had begun. This is where many turn back, where they confuse exposure with punishment, where they retreat into bitterness instead of surrender. But you didn't turn away. You kept going, and that decision alone proved that the fire wasn't meant to destroy you. It was meant to refine you. And now, the refining continues, because what God tests next is the posture of your heart after the damage is done. You thought the wound was just pain, but the wound was a mirror, and God was watching not what they did to you, but what you did with the pain they left behind. See, most people think the test is external. They think it's about who left, who lied, who betrayed. But the real test lives inside. In the silence, after the storm. In the ache you try to outrun. In the bitterness that knocks at your heart after the apology never comes. That's where the heavens lean in. Not to judge, but to witness. To see if your heart would harden or heal. And this is where the real chosen are separated. Not on stages, not in applause, but in secret decisions made in the dark. Decisions no one claps for. Like holding your tongue when you could destroy someone with truth. Like releasing someone you loved without vengeance. Like choosing mercy over memory. Not because they earned it, but because your calling can't carry the weight of their offense. That is what God was testing. Not your emotions. Not your ability to recall what they did, but the posture of your spirit when faced with injustice. Could you forgive without a confession? Could you release what your ego wanted to keep just to feel right? Could you look to heaven and whisper, "I trust you to make it right, even if I never get closure"? Because the most sacred power in the kingdom is not prophecy, or tongues, or spiritual gifts. It's forgiveness that costs you pride. It's freedom that doesn't wait for permission. It's love that is chosen, even when pain still lingers. Forgiveness doesn't make what they did okay. It just says, "You will not define me." And that kind of authority? Hell can't counterfeit it, and heaven can't ignore it. So if this word is opening something in you, if it's naming a wound you thought you buried, declare it now in the comments. That pain revealed me. Let those words seal this moment. Let heaven see your response. You're not defined by what broke you. You're rising through what it exposed. God was never testing their behavior. He was testing your becoming. This is what most don't see. They think it was about the betrayal, the lie, the absence. But those were just the instruments. The real test was the echo, the reverberation inside you after the blow landed. It wasn't about the moment they left. It was about the moment after, when no one was watching but heaven and you had to choose what kind of soul you would be. Would you let the pain define your posture? Would you let their silence dictate your self-worth? Would you let the disappointment become your identity? Or would you take the ache, the confusion, the unmet expectation, and return it to God with trembling hands and a heart that whispered, "Even now, I trust you"? That is what the fire was for. Not to consume you, but to expose what still burned within you. Because God doesn't promote untested hearts. Not because He wants to delay you, but because He intends to protect you from carrying unresolved pain into places of influence, from mistaking passion for purity, from building your future on foundations that still crack under pressure. He allowed them to get close. He allowed them to pierce you. Because what pierced you revealed you. It showed you where peace still depended on people, where trust still needed control, where identity was still linked to affirmation. And though it hurt, though it broke you open, though it stripped you bare, it was never meant to leave you empty. It was meant to leave you ready. Ready to stop, pretending you're fine. Ready to stop needing closure from people who were never meant to complete you. Ready to carry the weight of purpose without the weight of bitterness. Because your next season cannot be built on vengeance. It must be built on vision. And vision only comes from hearts that have been purified. Not by applause, but by pain. The next door will not open because you've suffered. It will open because you've surrendered. And now, God tests something even harder than your forgiveness, your trust, when nothing moves. There is a kind of silence that doesn't just echo, it hollows you out. The kind of silence that makes you question if God heard your prayer, or if He ever intended to answer at all. You're left alone, not just with your memories, but with questions no one can answer. Why did they leave like that? Why did they say what they said and then disappear? Why did heaven go quiet when I needed it to speak? But what if the silence wasn't absence, but strategy? What if God wasn't ignoring you? He was observing you, watching to see if your faith was rooted in movement or trust, in results or relationship, in signs or in surrender. Because anyone can believe when doors swing wide, when the phone rings, when the healing comes. But the chosen are refined when nothing moves. Patience is not passivity. It is warfare in slow motion, a resistance against the voice of doubt, the whisper of fear, the lie of the enemy that says, you were forgotten. But you weren't. You were being forged. Because silence doesn't mean divine neglect, it means divine depth. It means your roots were being stretched downward so that what God builds next doesn't collapse under the weight of visibility. And while you cried for peace, God sent delay. While you begged for clarity, He whispered, wait. Not because He delights in your pain, but because He knew your next level couldn't be rushed. What He's building inside of you takes time. Foundation first, exposure later, alignment before advancement. And if you don't understand that, you'll mistake every pause as punishment and every silence as abandonment. But here's the truth. God is not late. He's thorough. So if you're still standing after all this silence, after all the unanswered moments, after all the doors that stayed closed, you're not failing. You're passing. You've been patient with pain, patient with timing, patient with healing. And that kind of patience isn't weakness. It's sacred resistance. But there is one more question God is asking in this stillness. Are you willing to trust me not just when I speak, but when I don't? There comes a sacred shift, a holy turning of the soul, when you stop asking, why did this happen to me? And begin to whisper, what is this preparing me for? That's the moment. When survival becomes transformation, when pain becomes prophecy, when the tears you once cursed become water for the seed of your next season. Because here's the hidden truth. Your pain was never meant to end you. It was designed to reveal you, to awaken the version of you that comfort never could. The version of you that doesn't need answers to be faithful, that doesn't need apologies to walk in peace, that doesn't need validation to keep going. This is the you that was always inside, but only pressure could pull it out. God never wastes wounds. He never allows betrayal, delay, or loss without planting revelation in the ashes. That person who confused you, who broke you, who walked away without explanation, they were not the final blow. They were the birthing canal. And as painful as it was, it delivered you into a level of spiritual clarity you didn't know you were capable of. You're not the same person you were before they left. You're quieter now but deeper, softer in your tone but stronger in your discernment. You don't fall for surface anymore. You listen differently. You see through things. You sense energy. Because you were trained not by comfort, but by contradiction. You were sharpened not by easy love, but by sacred loss. And now that the question has shifted, now that you're no longer looking for someone to undo what was done, God can begin to reveal what this was always about. Because when A chosen one survives fire without bitterness, survives silence without losing their voice, survives abandonment without abandoning themselves. They are no longer just being tested, they are being entrusted. And what's coming next will not place you back in the pain. It will place you in purpose. But to walk in that purpose, you must first recognize you were never just the one being tested. You are now becoming the test for someone else. Something changes in the spirit of the chosen one when they walk through fire and come out whole. Not perfect, not untouched, but whole. Because wholeness isn't the absence of pain, it's the presence of clarity. And clarity only arrives after the fire has done its work, after the illusions fall, after the masks burn, after the parts of you that were built to please, protect, or perform can no longer survive the weight of your calling. You see, spiritual authority doesn't come from information. It doesn't come from titles, rituals, or borrowed words. It comes from endurance. It comes from silence. From nights when heaven said nothing, and yet you still stood in trust. From moments when you had every reason to quit, to curse, to retaliate. But you chose obedience instead. That obedience has a frequency, and the enemy can't counterfeit it. Because it can't be faked. It has to be lived. God doesn't anoint what you pretend to be. He anoints the version of you that survived the crushing and still worshipped. The version of you that forgave before the apology, that stayed faithful while bleeding, that praised Him while unanswered prayers echoed back like thunder. That version of you is no longer just a vessel. That version of you is a weapon. Because you're no longer speaking about God. You're speaking from the places where you met Him. This is why the enemy fought you so early and so hard. Because once you passed the test, you became the test. Your presence now agitates what's false. Your light irritates what's hidden. Your stability convicts what's built on fear. And you didn't even ask for that. You were just faithful, in the fire. But now you carry a sound, a weight, a vibration of someone who has nothing left to prove, only something holy to release. So don't shrink back. Don't question whether you're ready. You didn't survive that storm to stay small. You didn't endure that betrayal just to go back to safety. That wilderness trained your discernment. That heartbreak upgraded your spirit. You were not just tested. You were tempered, hardened by fire but softened by mercy. And now you are trusted to carry what others can't even recognize. And in that awareness, we step into the final revelation, the conclusion of your testing, the activation of your assignment. There is a sacred moment in every chosen one's journey where the storm ends, but not because the winds stopped. It ends because you stopped fearing them, because the version of you that walked through betrayal, silence, and divine delay no longer trembles in the face of the unknown. That version of you doesn't need the pain to stop to keep moving. That version of you has been reborn. You thought God was trying to teach you how to endure, but what He was really doing was establishing your legacy. Because pain doesn't just form character. Pain builds altars, places in your soul where heaven touched earth, places where your tears fell, not in vain, but as seeds. Seeds that would one day become shade for someone else. That's the shift happening now. The reason your spirit feels heavier, but clearer. It's not the weight of grief anymore. It's the weight of responsibility. You're not just surviving battles. You're starting to carry blueprints for healing, for wisdom, for strategy. Because once you've survived divine testing, your life no longer belongs to the temporary. Your time, your voice, your story, they are no longer yours alone. They become tools in the hands of a God who intends to send you where others are breaking, to show them what restoration looks like in living form. This is why He couldn't let you stay hidden in your past identity. Why He allowed it to break, even when you begged Him to hold it together. Because He wasn't protecting your feelings, He was protecting your future. And your future couldn't be built on fear or false identity or people-pleasing. So He stripped it, gently, painfully, thoroughly, until all that remained was the version of you He could trust. And now, that version is being called forward. But before you step into visibility, God always ensures your motives are invisible, stripped of ambition, purified of performance, emptied of ego. Because what you carry is too holy to be handled with unclean hands. He doesn't just anoint your gifts, he anoints your wounds, and your wounds now speak a language that only the broken can hear. That is your authority. That is your mantle. You are no longer called just to rise. You are called to raise others, to carry the ones who are now walking through the fire you once begged to escape. Not with advice, but with evidence. Not with opinions, but with presence. And presence is the most healing thing you can offer in a world still clinging to survival. You don't need to say much. You are the message now. So what happens next is not about proving yourself. It's about being positioned, elevated by the same God who allowed the shaking, activated by the same silence that once made you doubt, promoted not because you demanded it, but because you became it. This was never about being impressive. It was about being immovable, because only those who are rooted in truth can carry truth without distorting it. Only those who've been emptied can pour without ego. Only those who've been forged can speak and shift atmospheres. That's who you are now, not fragile, not desperate, not broken. You are ready. And from this moment forward, your life becomes a mirror, and not to reflect who hurt you, but to reveal who healed you. Because the pain may have shaped you, but the presence of God is what remade you. And now, with the fire behind you and the future in front of you, your next step is not a continuation, it is a commissioning. You thought this was about pain, about rejection, about someone who didn't see your worth. But now, it was never about them, it was about what God was building in you the entire time. Every unanswered prayer, every silent night, every betrayal that tore you open, none of it was wasted. It was all preparation. It was all sacred. That person, the one who vanished without warning, the one who loved halfway then left fully, they weren't your future. They were your fire. They were the spiritual scalpel heaven used to cut away what couldn't go with you into the next dimension. They were the mirror that showed you the cracks. And the weight they placed on your heart, that was the pressure that revealed the diamond you didn't know was hidden inside you. You've been through divine testing, not for punishment, for positioning, for activation. God wasn't just watching how you reacted, He was watching how you surrendered. He was measuring your silence, weighing your endurance, sharpening your perception, because He knew what others couldn't see, that you weren't breaking. You were being revealed, and now something in your atmosphere has shifted. You don't just survive betrayal, you interpret it. You don't just recover from storms, you extract strategy from them. You don't just wait anymore, you watch with wisdom. And that wisdom? It is the signature of the chosen, the ones who no longer beg to be seen because they understand that heaven sees what the world overlooks. The test wasn't easy, but you passed it, not because you were perfect, but because you were willing. Willing to release what wasn't yours, willing to forgive without justice, willing to trust even in the dark. And that willingness has become your weapon. So now, lift your head, straighten your posture. You were not made to collapse. You were not made to carry crumbs. You were made to conquer, with grace, with integrity, with a heart that is no longer fractured, but forged. And the next move God makes in your life will not just vindicate you. It will validate everything you endured in silence. Don't curse what broke you. Don't regret what left. Don't mourn what was removed. Because what left made space for what's coming. And now, you are no longer just the one who was tested. You are the one God is trusting. Type it in the comments. I receive. Let that phrase be more than a declaration. Let it be a spiritual contract. Let it seal this chapter. Let it activate what was asleep in your soul. You're no longer fragile. You're awakened. You're no longer waiting. You're walking. You're no longer asking, why did this happen to me? You're standing in the truth. This happened for me, and I'm ready. You are chosen. You are forged. You are unstoppable. Amen.